And they wrote him a letter back and they said, if you can get here, we will give you a scholarship. And so my grandpa rode his bike to Illinois from Decatur, Texas.
I remember watching a podcast with Rogan and Elon Musk. Rogan's like, what do you think about all this virtual reality stuff? And aren't people going to live in a virtual world? And Elon's like, is that your iPhone sitting there? And he's like, yeah. It's like, you're already a cyborg.
You're already living in it.
Yeah. You're a cyborg. Everybody's a cyborg already.
It's literally like you have to pry yourself away from them. And when I tell patients now, okay, here's sleep hygiene. What's one of the biggest problems? People don't sleep. Okay. Now, there's lots of different reasons for that, but one of the big reasons is people have really poor sleep hygiene because what do? They are literally on their devices till the second they close their eyes.
Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. Today, we have my friend, Dr. Hillary Lampers on the podcast. She is a naturopath specializing in brain health, hormone balancing, digestion, and everything in between. Her and her husband, Ryan Lampers, who's also been a guest on my podcast, own Hunt Harvest Health and StealthyHunter.com. They have a podcast, they sell gear, they have supplements, they have tons of videos and content that you should be checking out. Join us today. Hillary and I talk about good versus bad stress, being happy at work, your sleep health. We even go over a blood panel that I had just got prior to this interview of mine. We do talk about psychedelics, adventure, being married to a hunting superstar, etc., etc. You should check it out. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel, The Altitude Show. Subscribe, tell a friend. Appreciate your support, and I hope you really enjoy this episode. Thank you. The Altitude Show is brought to you by Peaks Equipment, the world's leading technical, hard goods, and accessories brand for backcountry enthusiasts. From trekking poles to headlamps to best-in-class gaiters, Peaks delivers a system of products that work to achieve optimal performance in the harshest conditions. Don't suffer on your hunting adventures. Peaks enables you to thrive on the mountain when everyone else is going home. Visit peaksequipment.com and use code ALTITUDE for 10% off today. That's ALTITUDE for 10% off on peaksequipment.com. Outdoor Class is the new source of premium outdoor education from trusted and knowledgeable experts. For hunters committed to improving their skills, Outdoor Class is the only subscription-based e-learning platform that provides unlimited access to video lessons from the world's most respected experts. Learn from industry leaders like Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and other experts across all the topics that affect you as a hunter. Make sure to follow Outdoor Class Official on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and take your game to the next level by going to outdoorclass.com. You can use code ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off. That is ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off at outdoorclass.com. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good evening, wherever you are. This is Dave Brinker. I'm the host, Altitude Show. Today, I have a very, very good friend of mine, Hillary Lampers, on the show. Hillary is many things, most of which I'm going to let her tell you about because I'll probably botch it, Hillary. But everything from a naturopath to a entrepreneur to a mother to a wife. She lives a very inspiring life, and she's become a friend of mine over the last several years, her and her husband, Ryan Lampers, who will be a guest on the show as well. But I thought it'd be best to separate you guys because you guys are always like a unit, you know, on these podcasts. Yeah. So I'm like, Ryan, no offense, I'm going to have your wife on first, and then Ryan's scheduled here in a few weeks because I think it's, you know, maybe just switching it up a little bit.
I like that. I'm usually the one in the background, and Ryan's the one getting all the attention. So I was like, Dave wants to have me first? What's up with that?
Yeah, Ryan is quite the celebrity, but yeah, no, I think you know, when I met you guys, it must have been 5-6 years ago when Ryan first called me. And I started researching you guys. I'm like, wow, like what a interesting couple. You know, why don't you give the listeners just a little bit, if you don't mind, just like a high level intro on who you are, and we'll kick it off.
Sure, I really should have this elevator speech down after
Nah, it's all
having a
right.
podcast for 5 years. And yeah, I remember in medical school the last year we had to do this class where it was basically, how to market ourselves. It was like one quarter. It was so stupid. I mean, they need to teach doctors more how to market themselves, but we had to learn an elevator speech about ourselves. And if we had 1 minute with somebody, how could we get them convinced to see us as a doctor? I'm like, I should have this down, after almost 18 years.
All right, 30 seconds. You go. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You can take as long as you want.
I'm Stealthy Hunter's wife. Break. So yeah, here I am. Dave, I think you and I actually met at the expo, the Hunt Expo, pre-COVID, and I think you were on the podcast with us, and that was the first time I actually
I do remember that. And I'm actually going to bring that up because we talked a lot about being married to a hunter, and it was so that'll come back up.
Yeah, that's when I officially met you in person. But Ryan had talked about you for a long time before, you being with Sitka and everything. And at that time, I think Sitka was probably the biggest and one of the biggest influences. But I am a Montana native. So I grew up, I was born in Colorado, grew up in the Rocky Mountains. Fortunately, I landed in Bozeman, Montana, which back in the 80s was a poor economy place to live. But my dad got a job here and we moved here, lived here, and I grew up here, went to 2 years of college at MSU, and then realized I was going to end up barefoot and pregnant living in a trailer with my boyfriend from high school, who, no offense, I love him, he's a great guy, but I realized I couldn't live my life like that, and there were bigger things I had to do. So, and we can talk about that story if you want, kind of my guardian angel talking to me about how to change my life, but I ended up moving to Seattle to go to massage school of all things. Really, I just wanted to get out of here, and I wanted to give my mother an excuse for why I needed to drop out of college. So I said, I'm going to go to Seattle, and that was 1993. Seattle was the place to be. It was the hippest, coolest, grunge, like the music scene. So when you were 19, and then it was pretty cool. So I moved to Seattle. I had no family there. I moved into a house with a bunch of people, paid really exorbitant rent, which I thought at the time. Waited tables downtown, waited tables on Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Kurt Cobain and his kid, and just got immersed in that lifestyle, went to school, got a job, and started doing massage on the side. And I was going to go back to medical school and kind of figure out who I wanted to be. And I got a job being a massage therapist in Alaska for a summer. So I moved to Alaska for a summer, put all my stuff in storage, and met this kind of very, 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 very shy guy who was one of the top fishing guides at this lodge. And we kind of had a little fling. And then the next thing you know, 2 years later, I'm married to him. And I stayed in Washington. And we just bought a little house in Granite Falls, Washington, with a little piece of land. And I went back to school for a nutrition degree and then into medical school. And Ryan worked for his family business, and he was in the fishing industry. And then in the summers, he went to Alaska for the first 7 years of our marriage. He was a fly fishing guide up in Alaska and Russia, over on the Kamchatka Peninsula. So he's had quite the adventuring life for sure, even up to that point. And then I got out of medical school, and that was a whole traumatic event for us, so we can talk about it if you want. But then I started working, and we had a little garden that we loved, and we tenured. Ryan basically loved to be in the mountains. He loved to fish. And if he wasn't doing those or working, which he worked 20-hour days most of the time, we were in our garden together. And I was not a hunter. I was actually sort of anti-hunting. I'm not quite sure why I married Ryan when I think back on it, but there was just something about him that was so intriguing to me, because he is sort of mysterious and super shy, and I always loved a challenge. That's always been my thing in life. I really love challenge and change. And all my boyfriends before him were just really outgoing. They liked to drink a lot, party a lot, have a lot of fun. They were the guy at the bar, like everybody knew. And I was really responsible. I grew up of a life with, divorced parents, stepfather, lots of responsibility. I was a latchkey kid, basically. And so I think Ryan just he fit more my responsibility lifestyle. So I married him, but we had a lot of challenges about what we agreed on in life, and he absolutely loved like the outdoors and hunting, and that was a big piece of his life. But we stayed married. We had 2 children together, and then I don't know, 2016, we started doing train to hunts. Like I just went with him, and he was doing them, and then we got involved in that community, and I started seeing like the hunting community and these people that we were, that's where we met. Gritty was at the first train to hunt I went to, and we just started bonding with some really amazing people, and my mind was changed, I guess, a little bit. And then he said, why don't we do a podcast? Now, if you all know Ryan is internally like very shy. Literally, when we first got married, if a waitress came to our table and asked for our order, he wouldn't even give her the order because he wouldn't look at her because he was like scared of her. And I was like, what is wrong with you? So he was very internally shy. Public speaking was not his thing. Yeah. So to see where he's come now it's absolutely mind blowing and boggling to me how much he's worked to change. But we had this home and we had this garden, and he loved to do outdoor stuff, and we loved to cook together. And so we thought, well, let's just start a podcast talking about what we love to do. And he thought that it would be great for me to talk about health when it came to to hunters, talk to health about hunters, because that time there was really nobody in the hunting space or the outdoor space that was talking about health topics that we knew of. I'm sure there was, but we didn't know it. We didn't know any. And I listened to only a few podcasts. I listened to all like the Ben Greenfield, the biohacking podcast. I was listening to health podcasts. I did not listen to hunting podcasts. I didn't watch hunting shows. And then one night Ryan brought home Donnie Vincent, the first movie Donnie Vincent made.
The Rivers Divide.
I watched that, and I said to Ryan, that dude is like you. Like, you should make movies, because, they look alike and everything. That's part of the mystique, and Donnie has this, like, mystique about him he tries to portray. But everything that Donnie was like in that, it really reminded me of Ryan. And I thought, God, honey, you should share your stories, because literally he hung out with, like, 3 people. Me, his cousin, and his dad. And he hunted 99% of the time by himself. He had very few friends. Nobody knew who he was. He was inconspicuous, and he loved it that way. He didn't want anybody to know him. It was fine with that. So we said, well, why don't we start a podcast? Okay, fine. So we started this podcast literally in our dining room with ridiculous microphones that we didn't know how to work, just like you and I have this technical difficulty. We couldn't figure it out. Mm-hmm. And this podcast blew up. And Ryan started getting notarized. Ryan didn't even know how to hashtag. He didn't have an Instagram account. He didn't know how to do social media. He told me, I will never do social media. My goal in life is to never comment on a Facebook comment. I will never make a comment. And I at that time was a broker. I had a medical practice, and I worked. I had a medical practice, and I worked as a broker selling natural products internationally. So I had this crazy job where I ran a medical clinic and I traveled internationally. So I also had to do social media, and I was on the computer all the time, and he hated that. And so once we started the podcast, he started an Instagram page. We started sharing pictures. We started Hunt Harvest Health. It just blew up, and it was the impetus that got us just drastically changed our lives. Because at that time, we were happy. We lived in this little house we'd lived in for 20 years or so. We had 2 beautiful kids. We had a beautiful piece of land that we cultivated and gardened and grew our own food, and we were really sustainable. And he hunted here and there. We spent a lot of time in the mountains. We went wild harvesting mushrooms. We had this but to me, I was very stagnant. I'm a change type of person. Like I need change to feel healthy. And I felt really stagnant. I was missing the sunshine. I was missing the Rocky Mountains. I missed my family. And I needed to change my career. I wasn't feeling super fulfilled in my careers, and so this podcast actually allowed us to make the decision to sell our home, to move back to Montana, which is where we live now. And part of the deal was that I would go back to work full time as a physician. So I did. We moved here. We bought a home outside of Bozeman because my mother's still here, which we're so fortunate now. We bought a home in 2018 because now good luck finding a shack for nothing. It's changed a lot since COVID. But I work full time now. I do 4 days of patient care. I have the podcast. Obviously, Ryan, if you guys, he's blown up and he's filming now. He's traveling. He does public speaking. We created an event company together, which you're part of, Get Stealthy Events. So we have Stealthy Hunter, that's our brand. We have Stealthy Nutrition, that's our supplement company. And then we have Get Stealthy Events, and that's where we do the Western Hunting Summit that you've been a part of every year. And that has, again, transformed Ryan and I, because he is a public speaker now, and he mentors people, and I think he just decided at his age, like he needed to give back all the knowledge that he has. And so it's just been a crazy whirlwind in 5 years.
What made you
But
so? What do you think makes like? If you look back at your childhood, why do you think you like change so much? A lot of people hate change.
so my father is, he was so my father was a salesman basically. He really kind of floated around and couldn't keep jobs when he was younger. My parents got married. They were Texans. They got married within 3 months of each other, got pregnant with me, a year or two after. My brother came shortly. They were young kids. And they migrated. I call my dad a seeker. He wanted to get out of Texas, so my mom left her full ride ballet scholarship at TCU to leave and follow my father, which she regrets, I think, in a lot of ways because she never got that education. She ended up having to go to beauty school and to take care of us because my dad kind of had a lot of floating jobs. So my mom still is a beautician in Bozeman, Montana, cuts people's hair for a living at 68 years old. Um, but my dad was like that. So we migrated north, Colorado, Wyoming. We lived in Wyoming for a while. We migrated to Bozeman. And then when my dad decided, I think he was about 32, I was about 12 years old, my dad decided that he wanted to be a pastor. And at the time, my mother had a very successful business in Bozeman, and he wanted to move again to Missouri. It was where the college was he needed to go to. And my mom, they made a decision that they weren't going to leave. My mom was going to stay here, and we would stay here and stay in school. My mom would keep her business, and my dad would go to school for 2 years, and my mom would support him through that. Well, you can imagine that didn't work out. But my dad became a pastor. They got divorced when I was 14. And so my dad ended up with his first church in Savannah, Georgia. So my teenage years, I spent my summers in Savannah, Georgia, Tybee Beach, and which is a very different culture than Bozeman, Montana, right? Like kind of culture shock. My brother ended up moving to live with my dad as a teenager. So I went from having a sibling to as a teenager not really having a sibling. So that was sort of a big traumatic event for me. I had a stepfather who was Native American, and there's just a lot of things that were going on in my life all the time, family wise. And so for me, I love to read. I love school, but I also liked dance. I was a dancer. I just liked change. It kind of kept me. It was just kind of my personality. So I think I took after my dad. I'm kind of a seeker, always looking for like new things. It was probably what took me to Seattle. Like, why would you move to Seattle at 19? You don't know anybody. I didn't even have a job. I just had a date that I had to start school. And my mom drove me out there, and she was scared to death. She left me. She was like, "What am I doing? Leaving my daughter in Seattle?" I didn't even have a job, and I just got a job, hostessing, and then I worked up to waitress. And I think to me that was just part of who I was. My mother is very like My brother and my mother are very similar. Is like my mom's been in the same place since she moved here. I mean, my mother is about consistency and routine and stability. That starts getting me, I get anxious with that, too much of that. And I love stability, and now that I'm older, it's better. I have children. I have to be responsible. I can't be like dragging my kids all over the place, but I think change is important. And when it starts getting stagnant is when I notice in my own self that my relationships start to suffer and I get grumpy. And Ryan is the opposite. He's more like my mom, and he's very slow to change, and he's very slow.
Which is
And
interesting
I'm
because
very
everything,
fast.
by the way, I would never want to live in Seattle, but what a great time to live in Seattle because
Oh, Seattle was an amazing city at that time.
I love grunge music. So
Yep.
I'm a little jealous. I'd like to learn more about that over a beer sometime.
Yeah, it
But
was pretty
I think
cool.
what I just heard if would be you love adventure. You like
Yeah.
adventure, which
Hmm.
maybe, I mean, maybe that's what ultimately brought you to Ryan. Because Ryan, for those who don't know, because I'm assuming a lot of people are going to listen to this that aren't hunters. We're talking about Ryan Lampers. He's a, if I hesitate to call hunters famous, but he's a very, very well known hunter and very one of the best hunters I've ever seen or heard of, and an incredible human as well. But it's interesting. Ryan seems like he's addicted to adventure as well. Like
Hmm.
he literally sleeps in his backyard in a tent, folks.
Hmm.
And he does
Yeah.
it not just once in a while. Hillary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's been sleeping in a prototype tent in your backyard for the last
Hmm.
month. Is that correct?
In our front yard.
Oh, it's in your front yard.
And it's actually my 6-year-old who talked him into sleeping out there because she wanted to camp. He slept out there for a week, and it was like 5 degrees at night, and she would just get ready for bed. They'd brush their teeth, and then they'd go out in the tent.
So
And
maybe
it's still out there. I mean, it's like 20 below right now, so they haven't done it, but she has that sort of, she's not afraid of anything like that. Like me and my teenage daughter were like, yeah, no, we're like nice and comfy in the house. We're not going out there. But I think Ryan's adventure. He has adventure for wild places.
yeah,
Drop Ryan in the middle of Seattle, he will have a panic attack
I'm
and will
right
not
with
know
him
how
there.
to get out. He literally loses all directional focus when he gets in a city or in
Yeah.
any type of crowded place. Even in a crowded room, he gets very, he has like social anxiety that he's had to fight through quite hard to do
Hmm.
what he's doing now for people. I mean, we can't even go to the Bozeman now. We go to REI, people are staring at him. And I'm like, he's like, just don't look at anybody. Because people recognize him and everybody's cool. They come up, they're so nice, but that's really awkward for him. I'm fine with that, like some stranger coming up to me and talking to me. But I also have a job where I talk to strangers basically all day long, and I learn their deepest, darkest stuff. And so I'm used to that. But he would not be who he is without those adventures. All the time in Alaska he spent, all the time in Russia. I mean, the stories that he has, I'm trying to convince him to write a book and share the stories, and he's getting better about it. But I want him to do all that before he loses his memory. I mean, come on, let's get this on paper. And I have adventure. I love to travel, but I call Ryan an animal person, and I'm a people person. So he loves animals. Like we have 3 dogs. I love my 3 dogs, but I would never have 3 dogs if I lived by myself. Um, my mom is an animal person. Like she feeds the deer in her backyard and saves the squirrel and like has cats and dogs. And I grew up with turtles and rabbits. And like my mom would save all these wild animals. And I was like, I am never having animals. This is like too much responsibility. So my deal is I don't like the responsibility of these things. So because I want to go out and have my life. Ryan loves animals. He loves a home. He's actually very a homebody. He likes just us. He's happy with that. As I get older, I'm happy with that too. But I love people. Like I want to go to Paris and sit at a restaurant and talk to strangers. that to me is exciting. I'll go climb a mountain and do all that. I love that too, right? Because I grew up in like a mecca of nature. To me, that was normal. Like going to the city was exciting. Like now that I'm older, I love nature more than I love the cities for sure. But
What made you decide to be? I mean, did you grow up around like health conscious people? Like, what took you down the path to be a naturopath?
yeah, so I have a bit of an interesting history there. My great grandfather on my dad's side was a chiropractor. He graduated from chiropractic school in 19, I think he either went to school or he graduated in 1917 from Palmer Chiropractic, or I think it's Parker, yeah, Palmer in Indiana, or Illinois, somewhere like that,
If
which
it's
at the
in
time
Illinois,
was,
by the way, we need to find that out because if it's in Illinois and Chicago, that's where my grandpa graduated from chiropractic school.
I want to say it's Illinois.
We should
I,
find that out.
yeah, so my great grandfather went to chiropractic college because he watched his father suffer from rheumatoid arthritis and was in a lot of pain. And he read an article in a magazine at that time where it was talking about chiropractic and how it helped people in chronic pain. So he was like literally the son of a dirt farmer, 10 siblings or something. They're from Texas, and he had no money. But he wrote a letter to the chiropractic college and said, here's my story. I would love to come to school there. I just don't have the money. Do you have any scholarship opportunities, whatever? And they wrote him a letter back and they said, if you can get here, we will give you a scholarship. And so my grandpa rode his bike to Illinois from Decatur, Texas, or Indiana, or wherever this place is. He rode his bike, okay? And that was back
Whoa.
before they had like freeways and stuff. So I don't know how many months it took him. It took him a couple months to ride his bike, and he slept on the side of the road, and he just got food wherever he could. He got there, he did it. He went to chiropractic college.
That's
And
crazy.
I know. So he came back to Texas. Now, he never was able to make a living at it, but he sold trees during the day. He had a tree farm, and he did chiropractic in his home at night. And he did chiropractic. He saw 3 patients the day he died when he was 80. How old was he? 86 or something like that? He was
Hillary,
12.
I can't
He,
believe
I
we've
was
never
12
had
when
this
he died.
conversation before. Our grandpa, well, that was your great grandpa, right?
That was my dad's grandpa.
Okay.
Yes.
My grandpa was very similar. So I'm curious to dive more into this because
Yeah.
I can't believe we've never talked about this. So obviously chiropractors are very n- natural minded doctors, like they're healers. My grandpa was a healer. So you had that kind of in your bloodline. And did he have a negative point of view on the medical establishment
He
like a lot of
did.
chiropractors do?
He did. So what's interesting is that my grandfather, so it would have been his son, he had 4 children, and 2 of his children got polio. And so my grandpa got polio, and my great grandpa refused to put the boys in an iron lung because he believed that the iron lung was killing these kids, basically. And so what he did was he did chiropractic on them, he did massage. Now, my grandpa's age of chiropractic was like old school. So in his home, I mean, he died when I was 12, so I have very fond memories of him. And he would adjust us all. We would go to his house, and he had a room that was his treatment room that for decades was his treatment room. And he had this really big chiropractic table. It was long, it was very wide. It was like a massage table. And you would lay on this table and he would massage your whole body. Like he would do this whole body treatment on you, and then he would adjust you. And my grandfather, who was his son, he got polio when he was a kid, and his brother. Um, my uncle, my great uncle, ended up having no problems with polio. He had no side effects. He had no deformities. My grandpa had his right foot was deformed. He had a bit of a bone issue in the upper arch of his foot, and so he walked with a limp. But that was the only thing that he had from the polio. And my great great grandfather just did like natural therapeutics, hydrotherapy, water therapies, chiropractic, and nutrition. And actually, when I was a kid, we'd go to his house. So granted, this was like the 70s and 80s, right? But he had like no smoking signs all over his house. Like you'd go to their front door and there was like a big no smoking sign. And I remember specifically asking my dad, why does Grandpa have no smoking signs everywhere? Because he was treating people in the days of like everybody smoked cigarettes
Mm.
everywhere. Like they'd come in your house and start smoking cigarettes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And he was adamantly against smoking cigarettes. He was just we called him Doc. That was his name. So the funny thing is that I had this other brokerage job. I was a partner in a company and I was a consultant with a bunch of others, and I somehow got this nickname of Doc. So everybody called me Doc. And every time somebody calls me Doc, I literally see my great grandfather. Like, I think it's so funny. I think I'm like an old man. I feel like an old wise man when people
Was
call
that
me
his
Doc.
nickname too?
Yeah, we called him Doc. That's what we called him.
All right. Well, my grandpa's
And
name was Doc as well.
there you go. So your grandpa sounds like he was the generation after my great grandpa,
Yeah.
and he helped to start the Texas Chiropractic Board in
Wow.
Texas at that time. They didn't have any, and he was, I mean, he like I said, he adjusted people at night, sold trees during the day, helped start the Texas Chiropractic Board at the school there, Parker, I think is the big school in Texas, and so that was very interesting. So I got it from that side. So my dad's side was always like literally a family reunion would consist of everybody getting together and like doing cracking each other's backs and doing massages on the floor. And the first family reunion on the Conrad side, that was my maiden name, Conrad. Um, I remember Ryan came to, and he just flew in from Anchorage in July, and we flew straight to Dallas in July. So Ryan hates heat. That's another thing he hates. He doesn't like crowded spaces and he doesn't like heat. And we get to Texas in July. Of course, it's like 110, like 100% humidity. But my uncle, who we had this party at, he's kind of wealthy, big pool. So we get there. We're one of the last people to get there. And I had a really big family on that side. And literally everybody's in the swimming pool. Like my great aunt Amy, she's like 88, and probably my grandparents weren't in there because they were kind of modest, but like everybody was in the pool playing volleyball. We come out, everybody gets out of the pool in their swimsuits. They're all sweaty, they're all wet and sweaty, and they're like hugging us. Oh my gosh, they're hugging Ryan. Most of them never met Ryan, hugging him. And Ryan also is the way he is. He came from a very conservative family, very humble, very like modest family. Like if guys around Thanksgiving have to hold a hand at the prayer circle, like nobody's holding hands, that kind of thing. My family was like, so then, we'd have it, everyone like, you need your back massage. We'd have all the cousins laying in, we'd all be massaging each other. And Ryan's like, your family is so freaking weird. I don't know. Like, I don't know what is going on right now, but this is just strange.
Yeah.
And that was that's what I learned from that side of my family was just touch, how healthy touch. I learned healthy touch. And I feel really fortunate for that because I had no I can just I don't if I did I don't remember it, but I'm pretty sure I didn't. I've had no like sexual abuse in my life. I've had no physical abuse in my life. There's been some emotional mental abuse with the marriage situation and my stepdad and relationship, but I haven't had any of that and I feel so fortunate. I just learned healthy touch. So when I wanted to change my life and leave Bozeman, was like massage just seemed like the first best thing because it could give me a job. I could work in a spa. I had all these great ideas at that time. And there was a great school in Seattle and it kind of allowed me to go there. So I felt like I just naturally had that in me. But I was pretty sick as a teenager. After my parents got divorced, I had a bunch of health problems. And I went to a naturopath when I was 17 or 18. She put me on a diet and she helped clean up my lifestyle. And she pretty much changed my life as well. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And honestly, when I was going to massage school in Green Lake of Seattle, the naturopathic school was there. It was close. It was in a small old school. It was pretty new Bastyr. And I used to go there and walk around. And I used to go, God, this would be so cool. I could do this. But at the time I was young, I was 20, and I just didn't quite know if that was it. But I used to go there and walk around. So it's so fitting that about, 10 years, 14 years later, I graduated from there and that I'm a physician now. So I've been a physician, I graduated in 2007, so you can do the math. But
Were you a prior to this happening, were you a partier? Were you like, was your lifestyle dramatically different than it is now? So you
yeah,
had to
so
change your mindset quite a bit?
so I have sort of two dichotomies to me. One, I'm very responsible. I'm a firstborn child. My father left when I was 12, and after that, I would say my childhood kind of ended, meaning I felt a lot of responsibility to take care of my mother. And so I became very responsible. My brother and my brother now, I mean, we both have turned out amazing for what we could have turned out. The choices that we've made. My brother's a designer in Denver. He was an Olympic athlete, but my brother he went into athletics and he
Hmm.
became an Olympian. And what drove him, he said, was the anger from the situation that we went through as children, as you know, my parents and all that. And when he lost his anger, he wasn't a good athlete. And he quit athletics and went into design. So he's got a design firm in Denver. But what drove me was responsibility. And I really felt like I needed to be that person that people could be proud of and that people could know that I was steadfast in, being responsible. But the flip side of that meant that I was drawn to people who weren't quite so responsible. So I had a lot of my friends were, and the boys that I picked,
That's
my
that adventure
boyfriends and
kicking in again.
stuff. Yeah, it was always the people that were like on the fringe a little
Yeah.
bit or liked to party. And so I always picked the bad boy who liked to party. And like I said, they were kind of the center of attention. But my mother wasn't a severe disciplinarian, but I had a healthy fear of my mom. She grew up in a very different world than I did. She had a lot of abuse. She, she, she was smart, but she had to work. She had no choice. She had two kids, two husbands at this point. She had to work all the time. So she gave me a lot of responsibility. And sometimes I was good about it and sometimes I wasn't because sometimes I'd just be like, screw this, and I'd get in trouble. But she would ground me for a month and like never give in. My daughter now, if I said you're grounded, 2 days later she'll come to me and she'll be like, Mom, and I'd be like, okay, fine, just get out of my face, go. No, no, no. My mom was like, no, you don't get phone privileges for a month. And I'm sorry, like you cannot like me, like that's how it is. But my mother never complained about her childhood. She never held that against us. But I had a healthy fear of her. So I think that kept me from being 100% crazy. Like I would pick the wrong people but she actually disciplined me enough where I realized that it gave me time to think about like that probably wasn't a good decision that I made. And so I think as I got older, that her work ethic too, my mother had and still does, like her work ethic was super strong. And I noticed a lot of people that I chose in my life that either I really fell in love with or whatever, they didn't have good work ethics. And what always
Mm.
happened at the end was like, I felt like I was doing all the work and I was being responsible and I was raising a kid. And then I was just like, and then I was sort of resentful and whatever, and then the relationship wouldn't work out, and I would end up finding somebody else or just leaving the situation because they were too immature or something. So I had this weird thing where I picked people that I needed to take care of, but then I got resentful of that, and then you know, Ryan really never. Ryan just doesn't need anyone to take care of him. And the thing is with Ryan, we're both pretty independent, and Ryan was the guy who was like, "Sure, I don't care. You can do what you want. Like, you want to go travel the world? I mean, I'm not going to go, but you can go. I trust you. See you later." And
Yeah.
before, a lot of the guys I chose were super clingy, and so I think that was another reason I liked him is he wasn't like we weren't attached at the hip, so he gave me a lot of freedom there. But I definitely, yeah, I mean, I partied. Oh yeah, my liver. But the thing is like now I always was responsible, and I remember not really ever enjoying it because I was always thinking to myself like, what would happen if something happened, or what would my mom do if she found out I was doing this? Like, you know what I mean? So I think there was like a bit of a healthy fear and it never put me over the edge into addiction. And to tell you the truth, I'm just not an addicted person personality. I like adventure, but like I can drink and have fun, but I'm not going to get addicted to drinking. Like I just can't drink that much and I feel horrible. I mean, I'm more of a sensitive person. I can barely take a medication and I feel it, you know? And so no, I don't feel like I'm an addictive personality, so that keeps me kind of in the straight and narrow, but
Because
I'm older now too, so
you guys are, and especially you, have sort of become in the hunting industry, really inspiring around health, and it's a different approach to health. Like there's a lot of even outside the hunting industry, kind of just it's not like bang your chest, like look at me work out health and look how shredded I am. It's more holistic. Like I was listening to you talk here a couple weeks ago about, testosterone levels and gut health and, a different point of view on alcohol and all these things. And it reminds me, to be honest, it reminds me a lot of my grandfather every time we're talking
yeah.
about this. But it's just a more holistic look at health. And, as COVID started happening, obviously I follow you and a lot of other people. And the conversation around COVID was just so strictly vaccine, stay away from people and take the vaccine. And it even opened my eyes even more to how crazy the topic of health is in this country. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air to just get different perspectives. Like I have nothing against vaccines. I got the vaccine, but I'm always looking for different perspectives and other ways to approach things. And so I think a lot of people appreciate it. And it sounds like your upbringing and all the things we just discussed sort of forced you to be adventurous and think outside the box, but also be super responsible. And you're very lucky to not have an addictive personality, because I
Yeah.
wish I could say the same thing. I'm not like super bad, but I definitely do have a tendency that if I try something and I like it, I'm going to want to do it again. So,
I think though that like being a doctor and knowing biochemistry and just knowing my own self, I think if I took substances and I liked it, I probably would lean that way. But my problem has always been like there's a threshold for me and then I don't feel good. So the next day is like this unproductive time that I've
yeah.
lost and that drives me crazy. But I've never been that person that's like, I feel so good doing this. Now, of course, I've never done heavy drugs. I've never done crack cocaine or heroin or meth or any of these things, that you can get addicted if you make the wrong choices sometimes. But I also know that there's something that biochemically, I just literally, my mom always used to tell me, you're just allergic to alcohol. I don't know why you drink that stuff. And she was probably right because I'm just slighter in that area. So it's helped me to be like that. But I do know a lot of people that get addicted. They don't feel good, but I have a lot of addiction in my family and especially my mom's side of the family. So I have to be careful. And then my stepdad was Native and he was a recovered alcoholic.
Mm.
And I lived kind of in that shadow, especially in my teenage years. So that adds another layer. So my stepdad was recovered and he did spiritual work in helping people recover from addiction. And him and my mother were very deep in that work. And so I was basically taught that stuff was evil. It was
Mm.
bad. It was not accepted. It was not allowed. And to do the work with my stepdad or to do sun dancing and all this, like you had to be clean for at least a year. You couldn't drink. There was a lot of rules around addiction when I was a teenager. So my parents were kind of like young hippies, I would say. They had a garden and my dad was super healthy. Like we couldn't eat sugar and like, yeah, I'd go to the neighbor's house and eat Fruit Loops, because they didn't care. But my dad was like, I think grape nuts was the like sugariest thing we had in our house. And, they didn't let us watch TV. We watched like one TV show a week and we watched PBS. And like, my parents were just very wholesome, but
Why do you
My
think it's taken
stepdad.
so long to like I remember my grandpa, like in the mornings he'd wake up, he would take his supplements, he would drink like a couple raw eggs, he would make a fresh peach smoothie, he would
Oh.
take a cold shower, he li- he lift he,
Wow, he fits right in.
I know, he like lifted weights every day. In fact, he was a weightlifting champion back in the day, but that's a whole nother story. But
Wow.
what I'm curious for your point of view on is why is all those things I just mentioned are now popular, right? They're now like cool, right? Everybody's taking cold baths and
Yep.
like why has it taken so long for people to take a more wholesome approach to health?
I think everything goes in cycles. And I think what we're seeing is I think what we saw, so in the beginning of the 1900s, the beginning of the 20th century, we had, the industrial age really started a massive change in how people took care of themselves as far as diet and movement and all these things because they came from the farms and the rural areas into the cities. And there's
Mm,
a mass migration of people into cities, and they were working jobs where dangerous jobs or they were working jobs sitting, like doing mass production of stuff. And they lived in crowded areas where food and sanitation and all these things weren't great. And so it became kind of like, I think, an unhealthy time in our history. But at the same time, around that time, we didn't have antibiotics. We didn't even have IVs. I mean, there wasn't even plastic. I mean, imagine no plastic. There's not an IV bag. There's not tubes to run, things. So they had to use medicine like plants and herbs and food
mm,
and things like hydrotherapy, which is hot, cold, water therapies and stuff like that. I mean, that's been going on. Remember, modern medicine is so new. It's so new. They were doctors and communities and healers and shamans, and they've been using plant medicines and water therapies and for most of human history. Okay, and when the beginning of the century, you had all this mass industrialization, and a lot of unhealthy people started. Unhealthy food situations started, but the medicine they were using was kind of all this old folk medicine. Well, and at that time, a lot of the medical colleges were naturopathic colleges, chiropractic colleges. They had homeopathic medical schools. A lot of that came from Europe, so a lot of people that migrated over, a lot of that was going on in Europe and Western Europe. They brought it here and they started these universities. Well, in the early 1900s, and I mean, most babies were born at home in the early 1900s, right? So there's hospitals and all this stuff was still kind of foreign. And the AMA came in and they sort of changed up medicine and they started setting up a standard of care. And what happened is a lot of these other medical schools, the chiropractic schools, the naturopathic medical schools, the homeopathic medical schools, they weren't attached to four-year universities, and they didn't
mm,
have the money that the AMA came in and they attached themselves to four-year universities, and they set up standard of care curriculums. They set up curriculums that basically required that all medical providers had to have, cadaver dissection. Well, cadavers are very expensive, and
mm,
a lot of these medical schools couldn't afford cadavers or, whatever. And so they changed the way people were practicing medicine was taught, and then they started going more towards surgery, pharmacology. They basically medicalized birth. Oh, now all women have to have a baby in a hospital because it's so much safer. Where
mm-hmm.
we know mortality rates actually went up when women went into hospitals to have babies. And so they changed a lot of the kind of makeup of that. So I think there was a cycle where we were using a lot of these things because we didn't have the modern conveniences we have now. And so your grandfather, my great grandfather were in that generation, pre World War I, World War II. And so the chiropractic, naturopathic, water therapies, food was an important thing to keep people healthy because once you got sick, you may not be able to go to the hospital and I mean, just think about it. If you had a kidney that died or your kidneys died, like you were dead. My grandfather, my mom's dad, died of kidney failure from sulfa antibiotics he took as a child. He died in his mid 20s from kidney failure. And this was before the dialysis machine. This was 1952. and my grandmother watched him drown in his own urine. So you got to remember, like, all the modern conveniences that we have in this day, like 100 years ago, sometimes you drew the short stick, like you were screwed. So people,
My grandfather on my mom's side died from penicillin.
yeah. And we didn't know that, right?
Right.
Penicillin is a miracle drug, but there's a lot of people that are allergic to
Hmm.
penicillins. And so this is a, I think the cycle has come around now because what's happened is we are so medicalized now. We are so we are so separated from the natural world now because you literally don't need to even go outside if you don't have to. You could stay in your house, in your apartment, have food delivered to you, watch everything through a screen. You know, you don't really have to be part of the natural world anymore. And so it's easy if you get sick, you just run to the doctor, they give you an antibiotic, and
Especially
you
with
just
Web
go on
three
with your
coming.
life. Yeah, I mean, this is what's happening. And so I think just our nature is like this is not healthy. Like we can't sustain ourselves like
Mm.
this. And so this resurgence of nutrition and health and the naturopaths and the group that I'm in, we're trained as primary care providers. We have all the same science as a regular medical doctor. It's just that medical doctors, once after that 2 year of first, your basic sciences, and you go into clinical care, medical doctors pick a specialty,
Hmm.
they pick a residency, they go down that track. They usually end up in working in hospitals, doing surgery, doing pharmacology, and they're very good at that. So they become very good at specialized, niched, high force medicine, we call it.
Mm.
Naturopaths, after that second year, we start learning more about natural therapeutics. We start learning about diet. We start learning about homeopathy. We also have to learn about pharmacology, and we also have some minor surgery things we have to do. We also do this, but we have a different slant. So I think the two can work really well together. But if you're just going to medicalize people and only give them help when they need it and then use this high force medicine, this is where we come into this thing where people are just unhealthy and they're not consistently keeping their bodies to where like they can't even fight it off. I mean, COVID has just exposed the fact that we are in a cycle now that we we are not healthy. Our population is not healthy, and the fringe or whatever you want to call it, those of us who've really been on the fringe forever in the last 100 years with the AMA trying to force this medicalized, this like unnatural medicine on everybody, is that naturopaths and chiropractors and nutritionists and all of us trying to stay alive and say like people need us because people need to learn how to take care of themselves.
What's up, everybody? This is Dave Brinker. I have a special announcement. My new song, Juniper and Sage, is available starting today on iTunes for pre order. It comes out August 19th. You can preview 90 seconds of the song on iTunes right now by pre ordering it. I'm super proud of this song. It's no secret that I'm a fan of the mountains. I'm an Oregon boy, born and raised. I grew up hunting elk and mule deer in Central Oregon in the junipers and sage, the high desert. My grandpa actually moved out here in the 50s from Pennsylvania for the elk, mule deer, and steelhead. Runs deep in my family. My friend Kenton Bryant, who wrote this song with me, came out here on an elk hunt with me 3 years ago. And when he swung the truck door open out in Central Oregon where we were, he said, "Man, that smell is incredible. I wish I could bottle that up," is what he said. And well, over the course of the next couple of years, we talked about writing a song about it. 3 years later, we wrote it. I recorded it down in Nashville. Like I said, it's fully out August 19th, but starting today, you can pre-order it on iTunes. Please go out and do it. Tell a friend. I'm really proud of this song. It's special to me. Juniper and Sage, go out and get it right now. Cheers. Your body and talk about like taking your vitamins and losing weight and exercising, but also be okay taking a vaccine or whatever modern science you want to take advantage of. Like, isn't that possible to have a world like that?
I mean, we had that world 10 years ago, but I mean, I remember just 10 years ago, you could talk about supplements, you could talk about, I mean, when the swine flu hit, That was a SARS. I mean, we've had SARS before, and
Right.
there was never this censorship of talking about things and health. And I think what it comes down to, again, it's this cycle, and the powers that be, whoever they are, I have no idea who they are,
Who?
but
Yeah,
we
I was
can
gonna
all
say, who are
probably
they?
guess is that it's not, it's, it almost feels it's getting to the point now, it's 2 years later, it's getting to the point where it feels like there's literally Dr. Evil sitting in a room with his hand on the button. And you're just like, what is going on? And I say this because 10 years ago there was still problems like this. There was
Right.
Ebola, there was like all these things going on. But you the censorship, you had more freedom to go online and talk about your feelings and talk about this and research this and post that. And now even health care providers are being censored unless they think what you're saying is right. And so what I tell patients, they get confused. It's just all confusing. And I feel, unfortunately, that whoever that Dr. Evil is in the room, they want that confusion because the problem that they is that the people have a lot of information now. So when
Hmm.
your grandpa and my great grandpa were young, information did not travel like it does now. Okay. So Russia bombed Ukraine yesterday or the day before. It's literally on TikTok. It is everywhere. You go on
Hmm.
Instagram, you can see videos of people getting bombed by their house like
Hmm.
now, this second. When our grandparents were young, it was like you got a magazine or a newspaper, who God knows how old it was. And think of in a year, 100 years before, that's where we get a lot of our tall tales from,
Hmm.
is actually stories that just kind of like Davy Crockett and all these, they just became bigger and bigger and the word spread, but it took a long time. And who knows if it was even true by the time it got there. And now it's like, who knows if it's even true? And it was just posted yesterday because the way the algorithms work
Yeah.
is they show you what your brain wants to see. And so the confusion is like almost purposeful. It wants to keep you confused and it wants to keep you in a sound chamber so that you pit yourself against whoever they are that are against you. And I, as a medical professional, and I've always professed to this, and this is probably why my life, I have lots of different friends. I am always in the middle. Like I was a mediator between my mother and my father. I was the mediator between my stepdad and my mom. Um, I feel like when I'm as a healthcare provider, I'm the mediator between somebody and their healthcare decisions. I'm helping people make those decisions. I'm not super opinionated. I am not a person that says, "Oh, I think this and you're not doing this.
Hmm.
You're wrong." That's not me because I always felt like if as a healthcare provider, if a person comes in and sits down in front of me, I need to get to know that person. And if I'm making judgment on their lifestyle or their sexual orientation or their race or gender or whatever, that's not true medicine. So I think I always position myself, but if I look back at my life being that responsible firstborn, I was always kind of a mediator and making
Yeah.
sure everybody was happy and good. And what's happening now is just watching the last 2 years. If you're one of these middle people and you start
Which I think
watching,
is a majority of people.
yeah, you start watching and then you start questioning, like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense and that doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
But now what's being shown to you is kind of what you start searching for, then it just starts showing you all that. So 10 years ago, it wasn't like that. You could go on social media and you could get different aspects of everything. I felt like you could even go on Google and get that, but even Google has changed their algorithm. So now it's only showing you basically what they want you to see or what you're searching for. It's like, it's data mined you to the point where like it knows everything that you want to see. So it divides people because it doesn't allow us to get the full story anymore.
Well, and they
And
get
then
paid.
everybody
They get
bases
paid
their
more
opinion off
for,
what they're seeing, but that's made up shit that they want you to see.
and they get paid, they make more
So
money when there's
I don't know
division.
why that is, but and let's remember, all of this comes down to money.
Yeah.
It's like you grow up like me. I grew up with no money. Like, I mean, I wasn't on the street and we always had food in the house, but, I was not rich by any means. My mother is a hairdresser, with a good work ethic, and I paid for all my school. I still have student loans. Like, I can spend money like the best of them. But like my goal in life is to have a good job and to make money and to be able to provide for my children and to have a comfortable life. Like, what's so bad about that? But everybody wants that, right? So the money is probably the bottom line of everything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you need to pay the bills, you need to keep a house over your head. And but as if you follow the money and you start following it, like there's an agenda, and usually it always comes back to the money. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
wars, all wars. What is land? Land is wealth. Land is money.
Mm-hmm.
Borders are money. People are money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it all comes down to that. So I think we have to remember we all have that within us. We all are striving to make the money. So are the big pharma companies. So are the media companies. So are the governments.
Mm-hmm.
They all have to do that. But what's happening now, I think people should be scared for our children. And I say that coming from the middle road where I'm usually the most hopeful person. But what I'm seeing now is this divergent, like, separation, and there's no gray area anymore. It's all
Mm-hmm.
black or white.
Mm-hmm.
And, seeing the things we've seen in Canada. I mean, I go on social media and I see pictures of people holding up signs saying like the anti-vax should be killed. They
Mm-hmm.
should be murdered. I see young kids in college talking back to elders, flipping people off,
Mm-hmm.
fighting for movements that do not care about you and are only working to divide you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what our young people are falling for.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually like our community and the principles within this community that I've grown to love over the last 5 years is that this is a community of very family-oriented people,
Mm-hmm.
people that have connection with nature. And I want to bring health into this community because I believe this community should be the ambassadors for health, not these health people out there that never killed an animal. They barely spend any time in nature. They live in a high rise in New York City and they're telling people what to do and how much money to spend on their food. And like these politicians and these governments who are trying to tell us what to do, the rural fringe people who are driving the trucks and growing the gardens and making sure you're fed, and the farmers and all these people. Like, we need to be the ambassadors because it's our like, I think our morality that we have in a family unit to teach our young ones these important skills for life.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more I look, I mean, we were talking about being sustainable and prepping in 2000. Remember Y2K? Y2K was
Oh
going to
yeah.
end the world. I mean, me and Ryan were preppers. We were ready. The world didn't end. We had a bunch of stuff. We were prepared. And literally, Ryan said to me, I haven't heard him say that in 22 years. He said to me this week, I don't know, maybe we should start prepping again. Like,
Yeah.
what's going to happen? And then you see Russia declaring war on Ukraine, our
Right.
government. What the hell's going on here?
Right.
Trudeau is like a dictator all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
What you're seeing now is a cycle. And there's always chaos. And we've just had it so good for so
We've
long.
had it. We've had it. We are spoiled brats, and we have been since the late '80s, to my best estimation, probably. Like, we've been a very, very fortunate couple generations, and I'm one of them. I'm not calling anybody out.
Oh, me
Like,
too.
we've all. If you live in America in the last 20 years, you've lived one of the best lives that maybe has ever existed on this planet,
Yep.
arguably, right?
Yep.
I have a question for you on
Yeah.
on. Well, there's a couple different things I wanted to ask you about. So, psychedelics and like natural, that movement seems to be gaining steam. I'm not actually. I hate being high.
I do too.
Because
So
I have high anxiety. So like the
me too.
last time I tried pot, I literally, my wife almost had to take me to the hospital. So it's not for me, and I've never taken any other drugs in my whole life. But with that said, it seems like there's a big movement right now for treatment with psychedelics, and I'm really interested in it. Even though I think I would literally have a panic attack with most of the things I'm talking about, and I'm just curious from a naturopathic perspective, where do you see that? Do you see that getting to the mainstream? Things like ayahuasca and DMT, and obviously THC is already here,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of people that use it and are just fine, and it seems to help a lot of people. So I'm just curious what your perspective on all that is.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing again, kind of, we're moving towards those plant medicines again that we lost. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
our ancestors were using these medicines for millennia.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know, and I'm not an expert on this. I'm literally not an expert on this. Like I said, I grew up in a native culture, and we were not, my family was against drugs and alcohol, but there were things like the Native American church and stuff where they used peyote and these plant medicines that have been used by Native Americans here in the north, the
Yeah.
plains for a long time. And from what I understand, is that a lot of those therapies are one, they're supervised. And so there's
Mm-hmm.
somebody, like let's say the medicine man or
A
whatever, the
shaman.
healer,
Yeah.
yeah, that they are facilitating the experience, and they are the ones that work with these plant medicines to understand them and to get the questions to have the answers, that to the questions that they ask, and then so be it, use it as medicine for people that need it. I do not think that these medicines were widely abused and used by the normal population. Now there are some tribes and stuff we know in the Amazon, etc. They chew on cacao plants and stuff, and so they're kind of always having some of that. But I do think there's definitely some addiction related there,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's kind of like us smoking cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
People can get addicted to those things, but the mushrooms and the ayahuasca and these experiences, from what I know and the people I've been around, is that these are supervised experiences that are done by people that have a relationship with these plants, and so that you can get the best out of it. And I would say those have probably started coming into the mainstream because, I feel like everybody and their mother's talking about ayahuasca experiences, and that seems to have been going on for a number of years now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's because people are so lost
Disconnected. Yeah.
and they're so disconnected. And if you want that experience, I think, yeah, there's this thing of, oh, I'm going to get high and I'm going to have this experience. But I also think it's this connection where people are seeking, like, how do I connect with myself?
Mm-hmm.
How do I connect with something greater than me? And so they choose to do those things. And unfortunately, I think that's also why a lot of people abuse drugs in general, like THC, marijuana, alcohol, um, other drugs. There's tons of drug abuse going on out there. And it's because people, I think they want connection, but what ends up happening is because they're not supervised properly and a lot of these things become addictive, is that they then become lost, and then they become they are able to escape into those realities that is not the same as these other psychedelics. So, our brain makes DMT. We know that, if we were, even with dreaming and a lot of things that happen, we're having these molecules secreted. And then mushrooms themselves, I mean, microdosing psilocybin is becoming very popular, especially with addicts, for brain function, for energy and fatigue, and a lot of these things. We have a ketamine clinic here in Missoula, where I've had a number of patients go to because they have traumatic issues from childhood and severe anxiety and a number of different things, and they go there and they get ketamine, and it sets them into, and they're observed obviously, and it's like, controlled, and they are like healed from their problem.
Hmm.
And so we know that these medicines, these drugs, when used appropriately, yes. Now, I have never done ayahuasca. I mean, I've done THC, but I'm like you. I'm like, I do THC. I'm just like paranoid in the corner. Like, I'm not enjoying myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it. I don't like the way it makes me feel. I was always more the sober one at the party, enjoying
Mm-hmm.
myself. And the minute I went the other way, I was not enjoying myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't done a lot of these drugs, and I've thought about it, and again, I think a lot of it comes to, again, my rearing, where I've had to fight myself out of this, like, these are bad, right? Because I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of taught, like, people get addicted and these addictive drugs are bad. But I'll tell you this one story. So I had medical clinic, my first medical clinic that was kind of big, and I had a big building. We were going to move into it. And one of the gals, the doctors that worked for me, she said, I think it would be a good idea to get this place like cleared out, to get it like prepared for us to come in. Now, growing up the way I did, we always had these cleaning ceremonies. So whenever we moved into a new house, my stepdad would go in with some of my relatives and they would smudge the place and they would clean it up. And we always had sweet grass and cedar and keeps evil spirits out. And like people can think that's crazy, but that's kind of how I grew up. And so I was very strongly believed in that stuff. So she says, I know I have this guy, he's from the Amazon or he's from South America somewhere. And he's married to my girlfriend and he's a religious leader and he does these ceremonies where he can clean out all the bad spirits or whatever. And I was like, okay. So I called this guy. He could barely speak English, like barely could understand him. He's a tiny little guy. Like he came up to like my mid arm. Super nice. He lived out in the woods out in Washington. I went out and picked him up. And he said, yeah, I can do this. So he says, all I need to do is just come to your place and I'll stay overnight. And I said, you'll stay overnight? He says, yeah. I said, by yourself? And he's like, yeah. And I go, okay. So I pick him up. I drive him to my office. I drop him off. He's got his little backpack with his sleeping bag and everything. He goes into the office. I drop him off at night and I picked him up in the morning. And he did his little ceremony and then I took him home. And he barely talked to me about it. But he said to me, yeah, there were lots of confused people there, lots of confused spirits, but they're gone now. Place is good. You're good. Okay, bye. And he was like, see you later. But he was using plant medicine. So his specialty was he was a plant medicine healer. And he went in there and he took some of his plant medicines. He converged with all the spirits. He had a cleansing. He told them all they needed to leave or they needed to protect the place or whatever he did. And that's how I started my medical clinic. And I didn't have any part in it. I wasn't even there. But he went in there and did the work for me. Whether or not you believe in that or you think that's real, listen, all religions and all they have all these ceremonies where they use plant medicines and they
Mm-hmm.
talk. Nicotine is a very interesting drug. Nicotine is a plant medicine that gives you euphoria, right? If you smoked your first cigarette, you got euphoric and you probably vomited because
Mm-hmm.
nicotine also attaches to a lot of receptors in the gut. And when you're not used to it, it makes you vomit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do we have what are called nicotinic receptors? And the only thing that attaches to nicotinic receptors are nicotine, which this is why nicotine can become addictive for us. Just like opioids, we have opioid receptors. But why would we have nicotinic receptors? What is the purpose for us to have a nicotinic receptor? Well, nicotine does a lot of things. In the beginning, it can create nausea if you're not used to it, but in small amounts, it prevents nausea. In small amounts, it decreases pain. In small amounts, it makes you think clearer. In small amounts, it is medicinal. And what's funny is humans have these receptors on our cells. Now, Native Americans and tribes, the medicine men smoked a pipe. Well, what was in the pipe? It wasn't just tobacco. They had tobacco in there. They had some different herbs, all different herbs that they smoked together with tobacco. But tobacco was used by spiritual leaders to talk to God. And you could do that when your senses were opened and you were a bit euphoric and you felt light and you were connecting with spirit. And so nicotine has been used again forever to help people be closer to spirit. Now, we abuse it in this culture, and it's a drug, and we are now addicted. And so that's the difference, is that everything is medicinal. Alcohol is medicinal. Alcohol's been used forever. It extracts things from herbs. So when we make tinctures, we use alcohol because alcohol pulls all of the medicinal components out of a plant. You take drop doses of this, you get medicine. You drink a bottle of vodka, you poison yourself. So this is where we've come with addiction. So again, microdosing psilocybin, using ayahuasca in ceremonial type situations to help you become who you are and to have that great experience. I'm all for it. I'm also a very sensitive person. So again, like my dosage is going to be super small compared to somebody else. But I think this is why we're seeing a resurgence, because people, they're thriving for that connection, and we don't have it. But remember, in the old days, not everybody was doing it. Let's say the spiritual leaders did it, and they had the communication with the spirits, and
They
then
were
the
the
spirits told
intermediaries.
them, and then they came to the people and they said, here we are. And you can look at that as kind of like government or religion telling people what to do, whatever. But not everybody was partaking in that, because everybody had jobs. You can't have like warriors smoking drugs all day long and they have to go out and fight. Like there was like responsibilities, and
Yeah,
I think
it feels like the society as a whole has lost connection with nature, and I think it's really easy to do that without even knowing you're doing it, because most of the population grows up in pretty populated areas that, I mean, the only way you can connect, that's why we built parks, right? And put trees in on sidewalks. And people crave taking their dog for a walk in a park, whereas people like you or I were very fortunate to have grown up. Like my parents kicked me out the door as soon as the sun came up, and I had my BB gun or my bow, and I grew up outside. But I was lucky. So that connection to nature, no pun intended, comes naturally for me. And I know how important it is. In fact, when I'm in my office for like a strong 8 or 9 hour day and I don't see daylight, I really feel like crap. I don't feel good. And all it takes is for me to go outside and shoot a couple arrows or take a walk or whatever. And you get a little sunlight, you smell the trees, you listen to the birds sing. It's crazy how our bodies crave that connection without us even knowing about it, because we had it for so long. It's really just over especially the last 15 years with social media and sort of, I guess they call it Web 2 now, where I remember watching a podcast with Rogan and Elon Musk, and Rogan's like, what do you think about all this virtual reality stuff? And, aren't people going to sort of live in a virtual world? And Elon's like, is that your iPhone sitting there? And he's like, yeah. It's like, you're already a cyborg.
you're already living in it.
Yeah, you're a cyborg. Everybody's a cyborg already. We all spend hours on our phones, whether it be in Instagram or texting or whatever drug you use off your phone. We all do it. We're all guilty of it, most of us at least. And we just find it, it's just comes so naturally, but we forget what actually, and it scares me a little bit for the future when I think about my kids in this whole Web3 movement. And now I'm not against it at all. I think it's going to happen. So we have to figure out a way to embrace it and use it for the better, because I do think there's a lot of positive benefits out of it. But
it's become an addiction, though. Let's talk about like dose dependent. When you and I first started on Facebook, I mean, I was an undergrad, I think, like when Facebook kind of came on the scene. It was like early 2000s, maybe, I don't remember, but it was like nothing. It was kind of like, oh, Facebook, you could put some pictures on there and talk to your family, and like everybody was like, cool, But I remember spending a whole lot more time outside back then. I mean, I would go to school all day, and our school was in this park in Seattle. I'd go hiking in between all my classes. Now, what do people do? You get on your phone, you start going through Instagram, you start going through your emails. I mean, we didn't have our emails on our phone. Like, to get an email, you had to get on your computer and you had to log into your email, and then you had to get your emails, and like, it was just a lot more work. And so now it's an addiction, and now we all have like dopamine issues. So it's literally like you have to pry yourself away from them. And when I tell patients now, okay, here's sleep hygiene. What's one of the biggest problems? People don't sleep. Okay. Now there's lots of different reasons for that. But one of the big reasons is people have really poor sleep hygiene because what do? They are literally on their devices till the second they close their eyes. And the blue light stimulates your brain and messes up your melatonin. I mean, I made the mistake the other night. I went to bed and I got on Instagram because I hadn't been on there all night. And what's the first thing I see? Oh, Russia bombed Ukraine. And then I was like, what? And then I was going through Instagram. That's the last thought I have in my head before I go to bed. And why am I waking up at 3 in the morning? Why am I waking up at 4 in the morning? Why am I feeling tired in the morning? Why, et cetera, et cetera. Because, like, first of all, I'm looking at blue light. I'm looking at my phone. I've got the electromagnetics. I should be, like, chilling out, not doing that, reading my book about something that's not stressful. And then I see war. Great, war. Awesome. Awesome. Now we're at war. Like,
Right.
this is, and then your dopamine and then all your like neurotransmitters and cortisol and adrenaline, everything starts ramping up. Now you're angry. Now you're pissed. Now you start reposting stuff. I mean, like, it just becomes this like weird addiction that now everybody has. Like, you can't. And you have to fight it. So I always think of like someone like Joe Rogan. Like, dude, the guy at this point is like, he's more popular than the president of the United States. I mean, it's insane. Okay. Governments are trying to bring Joe Rogan down. This is how crazy our world has gotten. Okay. You can have some MMA fighter who was a Hollywood celebrity or whatever. He is now telling the president, like, he's having real conversations with people and the government wants to take him down. That kind of shows you like what kind of cyberborg world we're living in right now.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine being him. Like he always says on his podcast, I never read the comments. I make a post, I never read the comments. But could you imagine having 11 million people every month download your podcast? I don't even know how many people else on Instagram, but like all the comments that are made. And how many of us would get wrapped up, like you and me, because I would call us, we're empaths. So, and then, people are like, oh, that sounds silly, but we're empaths. So I'm an empath. I'm a medical care provider. I care about people. I'm a people person.
And you
I
care
feel
about what people think.
I care about what you think about me. Like, this has been my biggest struggle in life, is to loosen up a little bit. Speaking of how doing drugs, let's just loosen up. Enjoy our lives, and who cares what you think of me? I'm almost 49. I'll be 49 in less than a month. I still care what people think about me. Like, is that ridiculous? I still care what my mother thinks about me. I still care, like, every day somebody's going to go on my Instagram and be like, you know what? I know a lot of people, they don't care.
That's just a natural human reaction.
Yeah, but I think as empaths, it's even worse because then you micro analyze every little thing. Like Ryan either likes you or he doesn't. Dude, he doesn't have any emotional reaction to, like, he doesn't get attached to things. And he's always like, why do you care about this? Why are you worrying about this? Like, you don't even know this person. Like, really, you're going to spend all this emotional stress on this? Or if you're a friend of his and you got to do a lot to piss him off. Like, you got to do a lot to piss Ryan off, really. Like, he's pretty stable. But if you do it enough, he'll just be like, done. I'm just done with you. See you later. Like, I don't need your stress. Like, I'm the person who's like, well, maybe we can make it work. Maybe it'll be better. Maybe I should do more for you. And he's like, no, stop it. Just cut it off.
I had the chance to ask Joe, because I've always been fascinated with any celebrity at that level. The amount, I mean, your whole life is based around what people think of you. Like your downloads are, and I was talking to Joe a few years ago and I'm like, dude, how can you psychologically handle all the scrutiny on your life? And, I can't, at the time it was a couple million followers on Instagram it doesn't even matter. Like hundreds of thousands of comments per post.
I know.
If I get 10 comments and one of them is negative, it can torpedo my whole day.
Well, that's human nature. Again, that's what our brain chemicals do. They go for the negative.
Not so much anymore. I'm not as bad as I used. I feel like every year I get older. I'm only 41, but every year it becomes a little bit less, and I've really, really, really had to work on it. But his basic answer was, you can't do what I do if you care too much about what people think of you. Like, it's
Right.
impossible. So the only way to get around it is not pay attention to it and not put too
Right.
much, don't give it the power. And that's kind of been the common answer I've gotten from basically celebrities or whatever you want to call them, people that have huge influence, is that, I mean, think about being a politician. Who the hell would ever want to be the president of the United States?
Dude, they have some kind of gene defect. I've already figured that out. Like they have all those people. So I grew up, my stepdad was a narcissist. Now he
Oh,
was a great guy, and I had a very close relationship with him. But he was narcissistic in a way that he was kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. I would even sort of diagnose him bipolar. Okay, he was never, I mean, he never went to the doctor, but we lived with him, and that's how it was. And the hardest thing when you're dealing with somebody like that is that they truthfully believe in what's going on and they don't see like what you see. So you become brainwashed in a way where you start to believe it's you. So the gaslighting is the word, right?
lots of gaslighting going on.
Lots of gaslighting going on. And then the people that are being gaslighted, they actually start, especially if they're an empath or they're somebody who's like that, they start believing, or codependent, they start believing that they're the problem.
Mm.
And that's the thing, is that politicians, I believe, in order to get a job like that where you are at the top of your game, like Biden, Trudeau, Trump, Putin, you inherently have a genetic tendency towards being a narcissist.
What about,
Because,
would you add a little bit of sociopath in there?
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, really, we kind of classify sociopaths as like those are the kids that like tortured animals for fun. So I don't know if all those politicians tortured animals for fun, but you have to have a level of disconnect with emotional reverence for people that
Mm.
is so far beyond what the normal person would have. And that's what makes a good politician, because yes, you cannot care what other people think about you. You have to be determined in your decisions, and you have to be able to make very risky and or you know monstrous decisions, and you have to believe that what you're doing is totally right. And in order to do that, you have to have a sense of belief in yourself that is above and beyond what most people would have, because
Mm.
most people would be questioning themselves probably, like, should I push the button, should I not push the button, should I push, no, I
Hmm.
can't push the button. Whereas if you're narcissistic, you believe, I have to push this button for the safety of all these people on this planet that I'm going to save, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to be the hero.
I saw
And
Putin this morning said the reason he's doing this is to clean you or cleanse Ukraine of all of the neo-Nazi genocidists.
yeah.
And it's like, whoa, like, that's insane. Like, the gaslighting is at that level is so insanely, it's
So,
unbelievable that someone can get away with saying something like that on a world stage that's so
mhm.
patently, I'm assuming it's mostly false. I'm not an expert on the situation, but
But
I'm
how long has Putin been in power? I worked in Russia in a hospital in 2005. He was in power then. And he had been in power for a while before that. That was when Bush was president. So Putin is a dictator. He has been voted in, but how long has he been?
well, he changed
Has
the
he been the
constitution
leader?
to stay the leader forever, right?
Yes. So Putin is a classic case of narcissism. Now, I have to say what I see right now with our government is kind of scary, and I would not want Russia, just even working in Russia, knowing Russians, being from Russia. Russia is a completely different country than the United States, and those people have lived under tyranny for like long time, centuries. Okay, we're talking they lived under the czars, then the Bolshevik Revolution, then they lived under Lenin and Stalin, then they've lived under multiple wars. You know, Gorbachev, yes, he led them into, you know, the USSR breaking up and into capitalism, into whatever, democracy, whatever you want to call it. But Putin's been in power for a long time. And so it's a harsh place. And the people are harsh because this is how they're treated even by their government. Like America, like we are just like little whiny little babies. Go to Russia. These people are hardened people. And now he's declared war on Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine and Russia used to be the same country, okay? So Ukrainians are the same way. They're Eastern European. They're tough. And they are not going to let you tell them what to do. So you got Russia and Ukraine fighting each other. And then, you know, to me, it's like, it's scary. Because you've got the ultimate narcissist, and now we have a president who's a freaking Alzheimer's patient, okay? He's not making the rules. He is not running the strings here. We all know that. If you don't see that, you are a narcissist. You got something going on because you can't see that he's not running the show here. And I didn't like Trump as much as the rest of them for a lot of different reasons. One, because he was a narcissist and I grew up with one, but I knew I could see through that, right? Like, we need a leader that's going to do what is going to be able to stand up to somebody like Putin and not back down. That's what we don't have. And we're seeing it happen everywhere. I mean, Trudeau is stepping down to China. Like, what we are seeing is a cycle. What's going to come from it, I don't know. We have first world problems right now. We complain about things. But let me tell you, like, everybody should start waking up to the fact that this is not, you just keep pulling the wool over your eyes. Like, but what can we do? I mean, what can I do as one person? I go about, I live my life. I try to stay successful, make a good place for my children, love people, do the best I can. But the world is changing. Web 0.3 is coming, and World War III is almost right staring us in the face. And this is politicians, again, the cycle of like, who's got bigger cojones and who's going to fight back. And unfortunately, who dies and who suffers are innocent people. And this is always what happens in war. And so when you vote in your rulers, sometimes you need people with big cojones. You need people that don't care what other people think about them. They don't care what you and I think about them.
I was going to ask you, I've worked with a couple narcissists, and actually when I first started working with narcissists, it really, really got to me.
It's almost hard.
So I had to like deep dive study it. And what came out of that was, I learned how to work with them, which is basically, this is so gross. But seriously, if you're stuck working with a narcissist, you have to figure out ways. If you got to get something done, you have to figure out a way to make it their idea. And you can stand up to them, but you have to do it very strategically. And it takes a lot of finesse. Otherwise, you're going to be put out to pasture, because they very rarely lose because they don't have the same moral structure. At least the ones I've been around don't have the same moral pillars that they work from. They're willing to do anything to win. Right. Which is actually one of the things I learned about narcissists was a lot of CEOs and presidents and dictators and basically art, like sometimes actually, and some pretty good ones are like narcissism is not always bad. Sometimes you need someone that literally believes they have that big balls to stand up to stuff like this. That's what I learned from it. That's not always a bad thing where I initially, but with that said, it is extremely dangerous. It's a disorder, right, Hill? It's a personality
so it's a DSM diagnosis, and there's a few different levels of it. And I would agree that the people that tend to be in those positions, they have some of that because it's just the nature of the job. You again, like you have to be able to make big decisions, be okay with it, and not care that 100 people are getting fired. I mean, you're going to care. You might care, but you have to be like, the greater good is that 100 people need to be fired for this business to continue, and I am going to make that decision and be okay with that. The problem is that when it starts to be turning into gaslighting, where everybody underneath you or who works for you is scared of you, and they don't have the equal opportunity to stand up to you. And actually, narcissists in a lot of ways, I would say that they respect. If you actually stand up to them and you hold your ground, you can earn their respect. And that's where I learned in my life. So, my stepdad was one, whatever, but I learned how to communicate with him. And especially as I got older, and we created a very strong relationship. I would say I was probably one of his strongest relationships because I could see through that and I could see the beauty in him. And I learned how to communicate the way he needed to be communicated to, that he didn't get communicated to as a child. And like my first boss, my mentor in naturopathic medicine, he was a ginormous narcissist. Like, my husband couldn't stand him. Nobody could stand to be around him. But he was super smart. He was a genius. He taught me so much that I know. And because I think of my history of having I've already dealt with somebody, I learned how to talk to him and to be with him in a way where I could let things roll off my back. The thing is, you can't take anything personally. You can't take like this person is purposely doing this to hurt you. You have to let things roll off your back, and then you can communicate in a way that they actually start to respect you because they see that like you're making effort, you're sometimes standing up to them, and that's good. And if you act like a weakling who, and I'm not saying that's bad, but they can take advantage of that.
Oh yeah.
So easily, and they can really make your life hell. And but I think for these big situations, like you said, you and here's the thing with, you should learn people's personalities anyways, the Briggs-Myers test. When you come to, and in the business I used to be in, the guy that I worked for, he had everybody take these Briggs-Myers tests, and that's where he put you in the business, was what your strengths were. So you can probably imagine what my strength was. I was the people person. So I was the creative, relationship making person that went to the meetings and made friends with everybody, went to the dinners and had drinks with everybody. I was the one who went and I got all the big contracts. Why? Because that was my job. I suck at spreadsheets. I suck at organization. I suck at admin. That's not I'll do it. And I've taught myself to do it, but I'm the people person. So I want to be with the people, not behind a computer. And that was recognized in me. So I think and then that also knew that I learned how to talk to people when I met them. Remember, a lot of these companies I was working with, it's all male, dominated, CEOs, narcissists. Learn how to talk to those guys.
You gotta learn. Yeah, those personality
tests. And the next thing you know, you get what you want.
Those personality tests are so helpful. I don't remember if I did. I don't think I did Briggs-Myers. I think I did another version of it.
There's a couple of them out there.
And at first I'm like, oh my God, more corporate training, like whatever,
right.
But it was actually the most impactful corporate training that I've ever been through. And I actually remember everything about it. I remember the 4 different types of personalities and how to work with each type. I remember what I was, which was super predictable. And it changed the way. My main learning is basically what you just said, which was you can like fight against people's different personality. Like everybody has a different type of personality, but it can be categorized into several different buckets. And if you learn how to work with each different type of personality, you'll be way more successful in life because there's no avoiding it. You're gonna work with narcissists. You're gonna work with people that are total pushovers. You're gonna work with people that are people that aren't people.
Yeah.
You're
gonna work with like the accountant person who's just running numbers at you, and you're like, oh my God, this is so boring. But it's like
the people. I believe that the people that have disliked me the most in life are detail oriented people because I have always been like fly high, crazy ideas, have no idea how I'm going to get done, pick up the pieces behind me, and accountants like literally want to kill me. And
Well, you know, Ryan and I are opposites, exact opposites. So Gritty made us take the test. So Gritty and I are exactly the same, as you can imagine. And Ryan and Gritty are exact opposites. And so me and Ryan are exact opposites. And so
Ryan's
Gritty and
very
I,
detail oriented, right?
yeah,
Ryan?
he's a logical, he has no emotional capacity and everything's logic. Me and Gritty are creative, emotional,
Right.
like we can't ever make a decision. So it was really funny. It wasn't really funny. It was so obvious when we took the test, and it was like the fact that Ryan and I have been married for 25 years this year, it's insane. Like it's impossible to think that you can be literally married to your exact opposite and make it work. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but we've done it. And actually, as we've gotten older, you still have your core personality. So my tendency is to be really creative, but sort of emotional, kind of flighty, like that, anxious driven. And Ryan's is to be calmer, grounded, logical, factual. Show me the facts. Don't start crying with Ryan. It's not going to work. Now, unless you're the 6-year-old. My 6-year-old starts crying, he cares. I start crying in a fight, he's like, "Oh, God, really? You got to do this to me?" You know what I mean? So he needs the facts. And I need the emotion. I need the like, I don't want the facts. I just want you to like listen. Ryan's a good listener though, I will tell you that. He's better at listening than anything. That's part of being a good, quiet, shy person is you definitely observe people a lot. So I would say Ryan is so much smarter at me when it comes to business decisions, when it comes to contracts, when it comes to just things that require not being emotional over. Like he's good at like, well, if this person doesn't like me because I had to make this decision, that's their decision. But you know, I hope we can stay friends, but I'm not gonna like not sleep over it. So he's good about that stuff, and that keeps me sort of grounded because I'm like you. There's like shrapnel flying everywhere. You know, sometimes Ryan will just say to me, "Stop. One thought at a time. You are making me dizzy. I can't do this." You know, because I'll be like, "We should do this. We should do this.
Yeah.
We should do
Yeah.
this," and he's just
Yeah.
like, "Stop, stop, stop,
Yeah.
stop." And I get that, and I think that's maybe why we've worked. But yeah, it's important to learn people's personalities and how to talk to them. Now, I have probably everybody who's going to listen to this podcast and who's listened to my podcast, Hunt Higher South, I'm sort of intense. I can be called bossy if you want to call me bossy. I've been called bossy before. I don't think I'm being bossy. I call myself passionate, but I'm being called bossy. Um, I talk in a tone sometimes that's passionate, but some people it comes off as being, you know, maybe too intense or whatever. And so as I've gotten older, you know, I think the thing about change is also that you need to work on yourself. And like these narcissists, like wouldn't it be great if they could just get recovered and learn about themselves and realize that not everything is right, like they could change. So I think people can change and we can work on those things that maybe we need to work on. You know, as you get older, like, do I want people to think I'm so intense and pushy and bossy? No. So should I really dive into that and see what that actually means for me? And maybe I am being like that. Um, and so I've been doing a lot of soul searching on that. I think that's the other thing as you get older and you start heading into the second half of your life. And maybe it's, I don't know how it is for men because I'm not a man. But for women, we have this very distinct hormonal shift that starts to happen where you go from being a reproductive entity to a non-reproductive entity, and your brain changes and your body changes and how you see the world, and you just kind of start thinking about things a little bit differently. Whereas before, it's all about getting somewhere, getting, you know, creating a life, having a family, raising your children. And I mean, I'm still in that stage. I have children. But as you get older, you start to think about like, who am I and what do I really want and what am I going to do, you know, for the next 50 years? And so I think introspection is healthy. And
How do you?
I think if a lot of these government and politicians had a little more introspection, we might be in a better place.
Just maybe, and maybe read history.
Oh
That would help too.
gosh. Yeah, and geography. I've heard some of these people couldn't even tell you where Ukraine was. I was
Yeah.
like, what? Yeah.
How do you How do because right now you guys have the podcast, which is Hunt Harvest Health. For anybody that I highly recommend you go listen to it. You have Hunt Harvest Health, or excuse me, Stealthy brand, which is many things, including
Yep.
supplements and some hunting equipment, etc.
Yep.
You,
Programs, stuff like
yep,
that.
yep. You have your event company, which is mostly led right now by the Western Hunting Summit that you do in the summer out in Bozeman, which is
Yep.
amazing for anybody that wants to go out there and check it out.
Yeah. Please come. It's so much fun.
But you're also a mother of two, correct?
Hmm.
And a wife, and then all these other things. You're a doctor.
Yeah, throw that in there.
What would you say to people that are trying to? You've created an amazing life for yourself, and that's one of the reasons I love you guys so much, and you guys inspire me. What do you say to people that are out there listening to this that want to create their own life and juggle all these things? What's your advice to them?
It's funny you should ask that because I'm kind of going through, I think, another metamorphosis in my own life right now as to where I'm headed with all of this. I think that this business that just slowly has grown over the last 5 years and where it's taking us, it's put me in a place now where I'm starting to think like there may be transition that I need in my life, and that can be hard, right? I think again, I like change, but I'm also very responsible. And hurting other people or making decisions, again, like we talked about, can be difficult for me as well as just like anybody else. What I would say is that typically I think a lot of us go through life just we're doing the motions, because like in my case, I was responsible. I wanted to get an education. I wanted to be somebody. I didn't just want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like this is me in my 20s, I wanted to be somebody and get something. So I did. I got a degree. I did everything right. I wanted to say that I never got divorced in my life. Well, I haven't gotten divorced yet in my life. But I had a lot of these goals that I don't know if I put just too much pressure on myself, but that's kind of how I got through life is I'm very goal oriented. And so I reached for a goal and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. Now, I understand, a lot of people have responsibilities that they feel like when they're feeling like there needs to be a change, they may not know what that is. And also they have a lot of responsibilities. So as parents, when you have children, you have bills to pay. You got to make sure they're safe. You got to make sure they're clothed. I mean, it's so expensive in the world today. It's kind of like it's been expensive forever. So we all have these worries that we have. But I think that life goes by really quick. My grandmother just died on New Year's Eve and she was 89. And she told me, I just don't know how I got to be this old. I just woke up one day and I was 89.
Mm,
And it seems so cliche,
mm,
when you're 25 and you have your whole life ahead of you, you think. And then you get closer to 50 and you never thought you'd get to 50. And then you start getting closer to 50 and you're just like, and then you see 89 and that's not very far away. That's like so close. Like 60 is so close, 70 is so close. And so you start thinking like, oh geez, have I really done what I wanted? And I think in the past generations, we maybe didn't have the options.
mm.
The world was set up where you were niched in a hole and that's what you did. If you were a woman, you were a stay-at-home mom, or you worked as a secretary, or you're a teacher. You didn't have all the opportunities. I mean, women couldn't even vote freaking 100 years ago. Like, you didn't have all the opportunities that women have now and we have now. So now we have all these vast array of choices, at least in the first world. And I think it gets confusing. But now is like, there's nothing like now, because even when I went to school 20 years ago, like you had to have a degree. You couldn't just go online and start a podcast or like a health channel and talk about how you healed yourself and make like millions of dollars. I mean, people that have no degrees, they have no letters behind their name, they have no student debt, they have none of that, and they make more money than I do because they're smart, brilliant, they shared, they're creative. So I tell people, like, I think right now is the best time in history that if you want to make a change, to jump off the diving board. Obviously, if you're like Ryan, you need to be strategic about it because you're not going to do good jumping off a diving board and hitting the bottom if there's no water. I'm okay with that. That's more my style. But I think that if you're feeling stagnant, maybe like I was when we were in Washington, if you feel like if you can see less years in front of you than behind you, and you still have the ability to one, either be healthy, get healthier, or you have your health right now, there's no other time in history than to radically change your life. And it could be even just small changes. Start a podcast like you did. Share about yourself. Write a book. I don't know, like we are losing so much valuable information from people by them not sharing their stories. And just like we started Hunt Harvest Health, we had no idea this would happen. And here we are. And life has really, we feel so fortunate for that. And that's because we made that one little decision just to share a little bit about ourselves. And it maybe you need to quit the job you're in. You need to do something else. You're not happy. Let me tell you, work, what is it? Like, happiness with what you do for work is very important. I see a lot of people, I see sick people all day long, and I see a lot of midlife people because I mainly specialize in hormones for midlife time. And work discontent is one of the biggest reasons people struggle with their health, because they're not happy. And they spend most of their day in an environment that makes them ill. And they don't want to do it, but they feel responsible. And they feel like they don't have any other choice. And maybe you don't have any other choice. Like I said, there's situations where maybe you don't. But if you can figure it out and you live in a place where you can hear this podcast and you have the opportunity to do that, start making the decision to do what you can to be happier. Maybe you don't have to quit your job, but maybe you need to change something about it. Maybe you need to go have that confrontation with your narcissistic boss and set the record straight and ask for that bonus or, whatever it is. But I think that we take the preciousness of these moments way too much for granted. And we're all guilty of it.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of people wait for the perfect moment to have kids or the perfect moment to start a business or the perfect moment to leave their job. These big life decisions. And I'm kind of like you, Hillary, where I'm not and I think this is both my biggest strength and my biggest weakness, is that I'm kind of stupid enough to try things and probably fail. Because I'm not that book smart, like I've never have been, but I've never been that scared to like try new things. I mean, example, in case I'm a musician, you literally stand on a stage and sing some things that you're not even that great at singing, and you have a good time. I mean, that takes like actually, it might take kind of an idiot to do that. I've never thought of it that way, but my point is the main point that I hear from people is that like, yeah, I want to do something, but now it just doesn't seem like the right time. Or another thing I hear is, I don't know how to do it. Like, why would anybody want to hear from me? And the answer is, and I heard this yesterday on I can't remember if it was Russell Branson's podcast or something, but the great thing about you is that there is no other you. So there's a story that exists in each one of us that is worth sharing, even though it seems really boring to you. Hillary said at the beginning of the podcast, I don't know, me and Ryan just kind of look at ourselves. Well, I don't know, we're kind of bored with ourselves, right? But I guarantee you there's a lot of people listening to this and all the other platforms that you guys are on that are really interested and like inspired by you guys. And I think that's how most of us think of ourselves. We're just us. Who the hell wants to hear from us? Well, the answer is probably a lot of people. I mean, there's never been a you. There's never going to be another you. And there's also never going to be this present moment again. So it's like, I don't know. I'm more on the side of, and I know some people would argue with me, but I'm more on the side of just make rash decisions, live your life, try to be as strategic as possible, manage as much risk as possible, but you're never going to manage all the risk. And sometimes risk isn't bad because you might learn something valuable. You have to step out the door and start walking down a path, and it's going to lead you somewhere that statistically may be better than where you are. And at least, and even if it's not, at least you tried, so you won't have that regret to live with. Because you don't want to be in a nursing home someday, or on your deathbed and have those cliche regrets we all hear about. They are cliche, but they happen all the time.
Well, positive stress is important. It's good. It pushes us. It's needed. There was this study called the Study of Origin, and it was a study that was done in Europe where they took a group of people from the city, just normal people. I think it was 10 men, 10 women, and they said, okay, we're going to send you into the Pyrenees Mountains for, I think it was 10 days, and we're going to give you food, but you have to make your food. We're going to give you like a sleeping bag and a backpack or whatever, and then you guys are going to hike into the mountains of the Pyrenees, and you have to be self-sustainable for 10 days. And these are just people that have not doing that. It's not like you and Ryan. These are like just regular city folks. And what they took all their blood parameters, their blood sugars, their stress hormones, all their cholesterols, their liver enzymes, all these parameters, and the other thing was you can't have a cell phone. So there's no technology. They went out, they had to filter their water, cook their food, they had to find a place to sleep, or they weren't going to get rained on. They had to hike, they had to cut trails, so there wasn't even like trails and stuff. And I think there was only one person who couldn't finish, and they all finished, and then they took a subjective questionnaire that said, how do you feel now compared to how you felt before? And every single person said, I feel calmer. I feel less stressed. I feel happier. I feel less depressed. And then they took their biomarkers, and they found that all their chronic disease biomarkers went down. So like blood sugars got better, cholesterols got better, stress hormones got better, but all their markers of acute stress went up. So liver enzymes went up, CRP went up, and that's because they were under some acute stress. Like, you're whacking trails, you're going to get some cuts on your hands and your legs, and those have to heal, and those create inflammation in the body. You're maybe not sleeping great, you're sleeping on the ground, all this stuff. And so your body's a little inflamed, and that's what happens every time you go out in the world where you have some positive stress. It's just like working out every day. You're creating positive stress on your body that breaks your body down and requires your immune system to build you back up. But the effects, the long-term effects for like chronic disease get better. And that's because your perceived stress goes down while your positive stress, or the positive stress, goes up. And we need stress in order to grow. And we need this positive stress in order to even be happy. And so that's, I guess, a perfect example of like, if you're feeling stuck in your life and you need to go out and stress yourself a little bit. Do something hard. Like start exercising if you're not used to, start lifting weights, go on a 2-week hike in the mountains, that could be quit your job. That's going to be positive stress for you. Like it's going to, but God, think about every day. You don't got to wake up and go to that job. Like you have so much more opportunity somewhere else. So I think that we've gotten really just complacent and things have gotten easy for us. But remember that stress is needed in order to grow, You have to survive those things in order to grow. So, I just try to remind myself of that when my life gets too easy, and or I'm just feeling stagnant. I'm just like, obviously I'm not doing anything that's stressing myself enough. Or I have a lot of perceived stress. Like I'm putting so much stress on myself that it's too much, and it's not good for my body. It's causing long-term problems for my health.
Yeah. Well, Hillary, where can people learn more about you and Ryan?
Well, you can go to, let's see, we are going to have a new website, I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks. So stealthyhunter.com, just put the H in there, stealthyhunter.com. You'll be able to find everything on there, like all our nutritional supplements, all our products, all our programs. We have a blog, we have recipes. We have tons of content on that website. And then we also have westernhuntingsummit.com. If you want to come, our summits are in June. We have 3 of them, elk, mule deer, and we have a family one this year, which will be a combo elk and mule deer, where people can bring some of their kids over the age of 6. And we're going to have family coordinators and stuff, kids coordinators. And I think that's going to be my funnest one to be at, because we really want to make it a family opportunity. And I work at a clinic in Bozeman, Montana called Elevate Health. So elevatehealthmt.com. If you're local, or, I have people travel to see me too. And we are obviously on Instagram. I'm Doc Hillary, DOC Hillary, speaking of Doc. I do more personal stuff on there, and I do some of my thoughts and stuff like that. Hunt Harvest Health is where we do all our business stuff. And then Stealthy Hunter is my husband, and obviously, if you love hunting, you probably want to follow him. He doesn't really talk about anything but hunting. That's all he talks about. That's all he cares to talk about. I'm
going to get him to talk about more than just that when he comes on the podcast, so he better be ready. Yeah,
that'll be awesome to hear. We'll see what happens with that.
Well, Hillary, I appreciate you so much coming on today.
Thanks, Dave.
I've learned a ton, and I hope everybody out there listening gives Hillary and Ryan a follow and supports everything they're doing. I think it's really needed this day and age, and it's a pretty sad week in world history, and this has definitely raised my mood a bit. I've really enjoyed getting away from my phone and with everything that's happening over in Ukraine right now, and so thank you, Hillary, and let's do this again soon.
I would love to.
All right.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time. Well, thanks for tuning into the Altitude Show today. Make sure to get out and support those that support this show. GoHunt.com, PeaksEquipment.com. Also, you can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe there and leave a 5-star review. Nothing less than 5 stars. We'll see you next week with a new guest. Have a great day, everyone.